Hello old-timers and newcomers, I am Cole Scratches. And this will be the last look at what I found for this year. It's sad, I know, but it's Yuletide, stress kills, and I am already starting to feel like I'm phoning these videos, and not to mention, it would be fun to do something special to go out on Christmas Day, but I am not vain enough to expect you to spend Christmas watching my videos. Still, I want to end the season off with a high note, on a high note. So, with that in mind, I thought we would do something in tune with the holiday season. Something light-hearted and fun. Something close to home and familiar, with the smell of pine trees and the chill of winter. And a huge bearded fat man breaking into your house to eat you alive! No, I am not talking about the Krampus, that's in Germany. This year, I thought we would take a look at Trolljägaren. Norway is an epitome of folkloric tradition we today take for granted within our modern fantasy-scape. From the humble peasant fables of the shrewd Knock, luring maidens from their homes, to the revered poems and prose of the Edda. Among its misty shores and spruce-laden mountains, there remains a sense that the past is not dead, and the old world lives on. A world of woodland spirits and dark creatures shambling through the forest. Inspiration for the fantastic and impossible runs off of the country itself. But maybe there is more to the fables. 2008, Filmkamerateene AS received an anonymous parcel with 2 hard drives containing 283 minutes of recorded video that seemed to suggest the existence of creatures long since banished to myths and fairy tales. The footage has since been authenticated and released in a rough mockumentary cut to inform the public and demand answers from the Norwegian governments. Are trolls real? It's not technically horror and more along the lines of fantasy with horror elements, but what worthwhile fairy tale doesn't have a bit of blood in it? We still read them, we still love them, we still tell them to our children. It's also generally considered one of the better found footage movies made. For a while there was even talk about an American remake, but personally I dismiss the notion that every good movie has to be American. And thankfully, the closest thing we ever got was an English dub. Of course, we're gonna be watching it in proper Norwegian. A title card informs us what may appear as a practical joke is in fact serious business, and then we're introduced to our main characters. Tomas, played by Glenn Eland Tosterud, Johanna, played by Johanna Mørck, and Kalle, played by Tomas Alf Larsen. These actors were relatively unknown at the time, but the rest of the cast consists pretty much entirely of famous comedians. Otto Jespersen, he's a comedian. Morten Hansen, he's a comedian. Robert Stoltenberg, he's a comedian. But I'll get to them later. The point is, this adds a layer of humor to the film, if you know who these people are. But I didn't. Film students from Volda University, the intrepid threesome are chasing a mysterious stranger that has been spotted around the area. Bear is a popular game in Norway, but very few have hunting licenses, and this man, Hans, played by Otto Jespersen, is not among them. No one really knows who this man is, but there is something very off about him. He only leaves his camper at night, and the camper is filled with peculiar objects, graven images, and fur. Basically, he's me. Except he has a camper. He may be a poacher looking to hunt bear illegally. The students are hoping to find out. As he vanishes into the night, they follow but are unable to keep his track. And the next day, an unknown hunter has felled a bear.
Så hvor denne kommer fra, det må jo foglene vite. Jeg har sjekket med alle mine som registrerte bjørnjegere.
It may be German. I think it wandered in from a Margaret Steve sweatshop via the nearest Toys R Us. An illegally shot bear always causes a stir, but oddly enough there is only prints from 2 paws. Did the bear walk out of the forest? On 2 legs? It's a question which is ignored by the Wildlife Board, represented by Finn Haugan, played by Morten Hansen. A mystery for another time, as Hans is on the move. He seems to flee away from Volda and the hubbub surrounding the bear, across the fjord and towards the forested mountains. Approaching him again yields nothing, but our aspiring documentarians will not give in just yet. The sun sets behind the horizon, and with the cover of night above they follow as Hans sets off again. A warning sign demands no trespassing, blasting area, but is promptly ignored in their hunt for an exclusive. A foolish ambition indeed. The Scandi forests are no place to wander at night when the wild things are stirring, hidden from the measly human eyes. In this shadowed vivarium of pines and moss, where the smell of plant matter thickens the atmosphere and flashlights grow shadows from the trees, the division between fancy and certainty blurs. A snap of a twig, the hiss of the wind, an unknown rumble in the distance. Inklings to unknown creatures stalking through the dark, and from this illusory pandemonium Hans emerges and proclaims... Huh? Yes, that was supposed to be funny, because this film isn't just a dark fantasy adventure, it's meant to satirize found footage. It's not for nothing so many of the actors in this film are comedians, but the humor is torr som fnöske. I didn't even realize it was there until Ryan Hollinger pointed it out, but yeah. This film is completely ridiculous, but plays it with a straight face. And if you think about it, you'll realize a lot of other found footage films do that as well, but very few take it to this extreme. And in that, it feels a little bit like a criticism against the genre, which is funny, because while the Blair Witch Project inspired a lot of writers and directors, I don't think the genre really took off until Paranormal Activity came out, and that was released just 3 years before this movie. I guess André Övredal annoys easily. Strong pines shatter like twigs. The rumble rises to the sounds of growls. They flee for their lives and in their panic lose each other in the darkness before quickly finding each other again. Tomas has been bitten by something, and whatever it wasn't a bear. And they demand answers.
Hva faen dere ute etter? Dere vil filme meg mens jeg står og sier at det finnes troll? Hva? Det morsomt?
Well, yeah, that is the joke. I think. There is a weight to the man, something discouraging and unfriendly, but he hasn't harmed them. He even drives them back to camp after patching up Tomas, and in this confined space, he has nowhere to run as he's confronted by their requests to interview him. And he decides to allow them, but they'll do exactly what he says, no matter what it is, including to rub their crotches with unknown substances.
Hvis dere skal være med opp I skauen der, så må dere lukte troll, eller så lukter de oss, og da stikker de.
He did give them the option to stay by the car. They can opt out of a Deliverance remake at any moment. And that goes for all actors. But they do go along with it, and covered in what Hans bluntly calls troll stink, he leads them into the forest, isolated, soiled, at the mercy of a stranger. It's tempting to make light of the danger they're in, like asking what to do if a troll dares them to an eating contest.
Asbjørnsen og Mo stemmer ikke helt med virkeligheten.
You say that. His comment may have been a reminder that reality is usually not so romantic, even in Norway. As they happen upon a clearing, Hans leaves them for what could be minutes, but feels like hours. And then the ground starts to rumble. Well, that's a troll. No shaky cam, no glimpses before a big reveal when there's 15 minutes of movie left. Just big troll right there on screen. I am happy. They run as fast as the forest falls around them by the presence of the trampling beast, but in spite of its girth and power, it loses them among the trees. Kalle is left alone as it searches for them, but soon meet up with Tomas and Hans, and together they lure it out of the forest. They freeze in headlights. Imagine explaining that to your insurance. It's real, it's all real. They haven't just discovered a worthwhile subject to document, they've stumbled into a fairy tale world of magic and wonder. Or at least, so it may seem.
Hvorfor vil du vises det her nå, da?
Det er jo en jævla møkkajobb. Ikke noe overtid, ikke noe smusstillegg, ingenting. Men det er kanskje på tide at det skjer noen endringer I trollforvaltninga.
Hunting trolls is in fact not a heroic charge sainted by angels and Wagner. It's bullshit, state-regulated menial labor, with no prospects and certainly no magic. It doesn't even have a decent salary. But if this footage gets out and people learn the truth, it might lead to some sort of reform. Being bullshit menial labor, there is of course a domineering manager. In Hans's case, it's Finn Haugen, the man from the wildlife board. He's less than thrilled about Hans keeping the film crew around, but he's currently not in a position to argue. He's got other things to think about. He needs to organize and direct the backbone of Europe's workforce, the Poles.
They're bloody good, aren't they? Yeah! Round of applause for the Poles.
Yeah. If you don't get the commentary, this bit may come off as a little bit tasteless. You see, in order to keep people in the dark about the existence of trolls, the Troll Security Service, yes, that is what they're called, employs a tactic of misdirection and scapegoating. Basically, they blame everything on bears, but in order to do that, they need to have bears to point the blame at. So what they do is they pay a team of Polish laborers to go hunt bear elsewhere and bring the corpse back, so the authorities have something to point at and say, see, it was a bear all along. Why Poles? Because they're cheap, do as they're told, and they don't ask any questions because they want no problem.
This is not a Scandinavian beer. No problem, no problem, no problem.
Ho ho! Trust me, there is. But to be fair, I don't think this is a case of willful racism or wanting to depict Polacks as simple. I think this is a commentary about the way, about how bureaucratic machinery exploits the immigrant workforce. That said, the only Polak to really speak is played by Robert Stoltenberg, another Norwegian comedian. Not a Polak. Moving on quickly, the students really lucked out, if you can call it that. Normally trolls stay within their territories, deep within the forest, and very rarely do they approach human settlements. It's so rare that TSS really only needs Hans for a hunter, but recently the trolls have become stir crazy, and so far the TSS don't know why that is. So it falls to Hans to find out. After breakfast, where we can hammer out there is nothing special about trolls.
Troll dyr, rovdyr. Spiser og driter og parer seg og eter alt de kommer over.
Okay, I follow, but that makes them omnivores, not predators. Also, despite what they keep saying, there's mountain and forest trolls, they live for hundreds of years, they're dumb as rocks, they turn into rocks when the sun hits them, and they sustain themselves eating rocks. They can even smell the blood of Christians. I think trolls are pretty special, and most of the fairy tales got it right.
Hver gang vi har felt et troll, så må vi fylle ut dette skjemaet. Angi hvor vi har felt det, hva slags kjønn det er, om det sprakk eller ble forkalka eller...
But even if the trolls are bordering on magical, the process around hunting them is very stale and wooden. Also, this form, it reveals a kind of embarrassing goof in the first few seconds of the film. See, according to the form, Hans felled this troll on October 9th, 2009, but Filmkamerateene AS received the tapes, the hard drives, in 2008. Oops. And that's not the only goof. They've established trolls calcify in sunlight, and Hans have several tails and pelts from trolls inside his trailer for the smell's sake, but he also has UVB lamps for light. Those tails should have turned into sediment. But ignoring that, Hans's camper is also full of sketches and drawings that witness to a very lonely existence. His whole life seems to revolve around the troll hunt, and remembering why he allows the kids to document it speaks volumes about what is going on in his head. He's clearly tired of his lot in life and is looking for a way out, and you kind of hope he finds it.
Hva ser du etter?
Steinskred, trær som har velta, sånne ting.
You're in Norway!
Er det sånn?
Ja, et eller annet sånt.
Ryggsekk.
At first, I thought they were talking about Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog by Caspar David Friedrich, because whenever I think of Norway, I think of Romanticism. But it turns out they're actually talking about a painting called Soria Maria by Theodor Kittelsen, which is inspired by a folktale about trolls. They have a subject and they're sticking to it.
Kanskje vi skulle sjekka det? Kanskje vi skulle dratt innom...
Er du skikkelig dårlig, liksom?
Nei, det går litt sånn opp og ned. Nå verker det.
Okay, this film has gone some ridiculous places. But if we're about to see were-trolls, I am out.
Betongstein og grillkull, det er en uslåelig kombinasjon.
Ok.
Cards on the table. That is so ridiculous, it did make me chuckle. And speaking of ridiculous, a collection of animal carcasses have been found under a bridge, and Finn is trying to convince a news crew it was a bear that did it. Because it's Russian, and that's what Russian bears do. Hey look, there's even tracks! But they seem a little bit strange. The front paws are on the wrong sides.
Har bjørnen gått sånn, eller?
Management is bleeding inept, who would have guessed? How exactly did these people manage to keep trolls secret? Then again, I suppose it helps that imagining the Tre bockarna Bruse took place in reality is insane, but it does make for a convenient instruction manual. 3 billy goats sound clip-clop, clip-clop. Led by a snare and tied by the hair, they're left to bait trolls with meat rare. The brothers Grimm could not have made it more grim, and they're left to wait right there. Pining for much, you lose the whole piece, but reality bound, the moral confound, and the troll will eat till he's round.
Fy faen, jeg hater dette her.
A lot of people would, that's what makes it horrifying. My pros, not the movie. Armored to the teeth, Lusekofte Siegfried strides forth, fearlessly baiting the earthen behemoth with the blood of a Christian man. Where such a resource is found can't be said, but it lures the beast into combat. A Goliath to his David, it seems to best him in seconds before vanishing into the dark. Not wounded, but merely winded, Lusekofte Siegfried rises again and pursues the foul creatures for its blood, and draws it in a volatile burst of rocks and viscera. Ew. Before he put it down with a light burst, Hans did manage to collect a blood sample that they can finally find out if maybe the trolls are sick. Lady, it'll work better if you have a second slide to flatten the blood and turn on the lamp. This lady is the surreptitious troll veterinarian Hilde, played by Torunn Lødemel Stokkeland. Because of course trolls have veterinarians, with special knowledge of their biology and understanding what makes them explode in sunlight.
Hovedproblemet til troller at de ikke klarer å omsette vitamin D til kalk. Magesekkene svulmer opp, og så presser gass seg ut I tarmsystemet og blodårene deres.
Okay, I was with you until the bit about the gases in their stomachs expanding due to a chemical reaction from the sunlight. Presumably the sunlight doesn't even reach their stomachs, so how could any kind of chemical reaction take place in their stomachs? According to your science, only their skin should calcify, leaving them in incredible pain, I imagine, and flailing about, and because stone is brittle, it would be shrugged off, exposing flesh, which would then calcify in turn, and so it would go on, layer by layer, until they have reduced themselves to a fossilized pile of singles. Which sounds like it would be a fucking awesome way to see them die. Övrdahl, why didn't you do that? Too expensive? Presumably too gruesome, as Hilde reminds us trolls are still just animals, and using sunlight to calcify them is a horrible way of putting them down. But a lamp is cheaper than a syringe. On some level, I believe Hans agrees with her, but he still needs to finish his job. While Hilde analyzes the samples, there are still many areas that Hans needs to examine for disturbances. Territories that may have been abandoned, lores that may have been cleaned off. Mostly he finds nothing, but it affords us a further glimpse into the nature of trolls. Something Finn Haugen seems completely oblivious to.
Han påstår at alle de rømte trollene kommer fra Dovre-reviret. Bare fordi han ikke ser noe troll på dette satellittbildet her. Men troll synes jo ikke på satellittbilder.
Okay. If a satellite can't photograph them, how is the camera picking them up? I mean, I get you're establishing Finn is an incompetent upper management clown, and it does help explain how no one's been able to spot trolls until now, but no. No, how has no one spotted trolls until now?
At ikke folk legger merke til svære beis som kommer dundrende over jordet her og raserer skauen sånn som dette her.
And doubling focus on that plot hole doesn't close it! Examining the latest disturbance, it leads our quartet to an abandoned mine. Hans assures them the trolls have left, but it's no wonder at least one of them asks for extra troll stink. The walls close in around them as they descend through the tunnels in search for clues of where the creatures may have gone, before the tunnel widens into a hall. The floor is littered with spruce branches, animal carcasses, and bodily fluids of an unmentionable nature. And with a start, Hans realizes this is a lair. They're standing in the Hall of Mountain Kings. Before they can flee, the pack returns, sniffing and snorting their way through the dark, forcing the crew to hide in a crevice, with nothing to do but wait for an opportunity to leave. They could be stuck for the night among the farts and groans of folkloric critters, if not for Kalle's incessant fidgeting and rubbing. They try to tell him to calm down. If they can just remain quiet, the trolls won't know they're there. But it may not be enough. No shit. I mean, yeah, I edited around a lot of it, but it's been a concern since the very beginning that one of them is Christian. And Tomas, he assured us twice that he doesn't believe in God. And Hans himself, he discounted Johanna. And that left only Kalle, who has been very quiet on the matter. It's not really surprising. But it is inconvenient, as Kalle's rising panic alerts the trolls to their presence. They can smell his blood in the dark, but their blindness hides the crew from their fury. Still, they have to flee through the pack before they're found. They run through the cabin, dodging claws and teeth as the bumbling monstrosities launch for their footfalls and the smell stinging their nostrils. Hans's weapon seems enough to keep them at bay, just long enough for them to set off through the tunnels, but as they reach the morning light, Kalle falls behind, just within reach of a Mountain King's fist. Good question. It's not been to up the body count, it's not that kind of movie. It's actually to further the story. Having watched their friend be devoured before their eyes, this feels like the end of the line for their documentary. But when they return to the camper, Finn is waiting for them. He demands the footage from them, which reminds them all of this, including Kalle's death, will be swept under the rug for reasons they don't even know why, and the students will have none of it. This is not going to be buried. People will know. And to that end, they get themselves another camera operator, Malika, played by Urmila Berg-Domaas. They just called someone up and asked them to come out without telling them what they're getting themselves into. I mean, I get if they're still reeling a little bit from their friend's death and they're not thinking all that clearly, but still. Dick move. Speaking of dick moves, they less than elegantly ask whether or not she's Christian, coming off a bit like they'll hold her religion against her, but she's Muslim, so it's all good. Maybe. It's hard to tell. Either way, Finn was proven right. Whatever is upsetting the trolls is centered around Dovrefjell, and despite Hans's fevered protests, Finn demands he goes in to clear it all up. Straight into the territory of the Jotun.
Altså, ærlig talt. Alle dere tror på troll?
Could show her the footage? I don't know. Don't the cameras have a playback function? How else would you explain this? The utter ridiculousness of this reality, the insanity of it. It's a possibility you don't even entertain if you live smack on the front lines. For example, there is the operators of the power lines surrounding Dovrefjell. They're fully aware the power don't go anywhere, it just circulates around the mountain. But...
Strømmen går ingen steds.
Nei. Du ser jo, den går rundt. Og det jo i et naturskjønt område.
They're less than bothered. Also, the humor is still subtle, but it is there. For example, on the first level, there is the stupidity of the power plant worker, which you can laugh a little bit at. And then there are the power lines themselves. You see, in Scandinavia, it's a bit of a hot button to build power lines, or anything really, through areas that are, as we call them, natursköna. Basically, people feel they ruin the beauty of the wide landscape, and many people feel they're completely unnecessary and don't really do anything. And here, they literally do nothing. They just circulate the power in a, well, circle around the fjell. Except it actually does do something. It's a gigantic electric fence keeping the Jotun trolls in place. And you know all of this is supposed to be funny because the power plant operator is played by Knut Nerum, who is a Norwegian comedian. That makes it funny. Laugh! Their visit revealed more than they expected. 3 weeks ago, 1,000 feet of power lines hit the ground, and for a Jotun to be agitated enough to cross the power lines, something is very wrong. So they stay the night in the fakest bleeding winter set I have seen on a screen. And I grew up watching Pistvakt.
Finns Gud? Ja, det väl klart. Jesus då? Ja, han dog väl.
While the horrid thought of being deep in the beast's territory weighs heavy on their minds, it's not out of fear Hans stays reserved. Long ago, the TSS was unable to stop the construction of a tunnel through a considerable lair, so he was asked to exterminate them all. Adults, children, pregnant females, completely innocent, just to make way for a goddamn road.
Så det blev en jävla massaker.
Okay, that's sad and all, but if complete destruction is an option, why haven't people been sent into all of the lairs and put down all of the trolls? Then again, I've heard similar arguments about wolves, but far as I can tell, trolls don't really serve a function in nature. I mean, they eat stones for crying out loud, and I have a very difficult time seeing any animal that isn't chained not running away from them. Also, a lot of people don't even know trolls exist, apparently. Would they be missed? Really, there is only Hans to care. He's the only hunter, and the TSS don't see further than the tip of their nose. Hans have lived alone with this secret life for 40 years, robbed of the common decency of a normal life. It's enough to make a man hollow. But it is him who stands between the trolls, Norwegian society, and catastrophe. He's the one who has to respond when the unforeseen happens, before it spills over and innocent people get hurt.
Rabies?
Ah, too late. Hilde found the blood sample they delivered to contain rabies, and suddenly the rampage makes sense. Somehow, somewhere, the Jotun was infected, and as it broke out and scared off all the trolls before it, it infected them as it went. Through the mountain kings to the snagglefinch to the troll that bit Tomas. It's too late for him, and they can't run now. The Jotun bears down upon them. Okay, sit your asses down, because this is the best scene of the entire movie. With nothing but a spotlight and Jesuite wailing, Hans goes up against the Jotun in an epic final showdown! Except there is a wrinkle. It's early morning and the sun is rising. Maybe Hans wants to put the thing out of its misery, giving it a relatively quick death, rather than let it suffer for hours while the sunlight gets stronger and stronger. But the problem is about to take care of itself. Shut up! This is awesome! Draculaean snows pull in to obscure the rising sun, leaving the flashes of Hans's weapon the only source of light. He strikes with vengeance, but the ancient wiring gives out, forcing his retreat. As he restores powers, the Jotun sets after them, spiteful of its stings. But the run only wears it out for Hans to strike again. Flicker by flicker, the pained roars of the Jotun echoes across the mountains. The stings push him to flee, but Hans will not let it get away. Driving the vehicle within its range, the troll strikes, and the world goes deaf. Not a sound, but a rumbling sensation of the troll's pained screams through the ground. The car totaled, there is only one thing left to do. There is a sense of finality as Hans wished the crew good luck and approached the suffering animal. They stare each other down, titans on opposite sides of the same coin, as if to say a final goodbye. Hans raises his weapon and fires. And then he fucks off. The Winterland Clint Eastwood disappears into the desert after a long night's journey to dawn. His fate, like the man himself, shall remain a mystery. As will the students, the Troll Security Service wills it. They refuse to let this footage reveal the truth, but one person manages to get away. It's enough for the footage to reach the people it needs to. But did it amount to anything?
Norge er et troll, sånn at det kommer til å være behov for flere strømledninger i Norge.
Fun fact, that really was Norway's former Prime Minister conducting a press interview where he genuinely said those words. It's just edited slightly. He's actually talking about an oil field called Trollfelt. I don't know who the stand-in is, though. There are several people listed as appearing in the film that I couldn't actually find photographs of. And this is probably among the best movies that I know. Not just in found footage, in general. This movie isn't perfect, not by a long shot, but it nails everything that I look for in a movie with a compelling story, sensible setup, entertaining scenes, and it doesn't strike you over the head with how clever it is. It just makes its case and leaves you satisfied, wanting nothing. The satire in deadpanning a completely ridiculous concept can feel a little snobbish if you take it as a criticism against found footage, but as a wall for the humor to bounce off of, I found it very entertaining. I know I said the jokes aren't funny, but what I meant is they're not bust-a-gut Joker laugh funny. They're too subtle for that. But being told one slow elderly man turned animals the size of houses to stone with a camera flash as a secret aspect of government wildlife management is its own flavor of entertaining. Hans was unquestionably the main character of the film, even if he didn't really go through much of an arc. What made him intriguing was the creeping understanding that his apathetic, almost nihilistic attitude towards his job came from decades of doing it. His story didn't lie in the challenges he faced and overcame in the film, but rather what the film gradually revealed about him. At first, he seemed like a misanthrope and axe murderer, until it's revealed he is only antisocial out of necessity because he needs to keep his job secret. In reality, he is stoic and to the point, reminiscent of a lone gunman from an old western. But there's more to him still in that he longs for a change and wants to give up his life as a hunter. What I also took from him is, despite having every excuse to, he hadn't let his lot in life make him bitter, but just tired of it all. And I find that very impressive and part of what makes me like him so much. It may also be because he reminds me of older people that I grew up with, but that's neither here nor there. At first glance, the movie is very bleak. While the trolls are exotic, they're portrayed as nothing but normal animals. Yes, they turn into stone when hit by sunlight and can apparently sustain themselves by eating stone. But down to brass tacks, they're no different from the very bears the TSS insists all their disturbances are. Their health is monitored, they're regulated within their nature preserves, they're put down when they wander too close to society, but are mostly harmless and even innocent so long as they're left alone in nature. And Hans is saddled with the responsibility of hunting them down for no other crime than being in the way. Or at least that's how it tends to be, according to Hans. But all the trolls in this film have rabies. It's difficult to feel a sense of meaninglessness about Hans's vocation when you have that in the back of your head, and the whole film follows him trying to address this problem, even if he doesn't know it yet. Much as Hans himself would disagree, I think this film is the story about a warrior who has tired of war, and it chronicles his last great battle before he can finally rest. While the past that brought him to this moment may be empty and depressing in the scheme of things, seeing him cross the home stretch and finally move on from the hunt, to me is a very pleasing story, and in its own bizarre way, even kind of optimistic. But this review isn't just about Hans, what about all the other stuff? This movie is full of stuff. Beyond the many layers to Hans's character and journey and satirizing found footage cinematography, this film touches on many things that I am fairly familiar with. Obtuse bureaucracy, the threat to farm animals from wildlife, disillusionment with one's occupation, controversy about development v. preservation of nature. The movie doesn't really discuss these things, but use them beautifully to build up the story while poking fun at them. Now, much as I like this film, it does have a few issues. Starting with the TSS. Why does this organization exist? Far as I can tell, there is no reason to keep the public in the dark about the existence of trolls. It comes across like they do it because that's the organization's purpose and no one has stopped to question that purpose. Being familiar with bureaucracies, I actually find that very believable, but it still doesn't answer the question and it does bother me. But not as much as the special effects. This film is a fantasy, so it demands some leniency about what we're willing to accept as real. About half of the time, the special effects looked really good, they fit in with the environment, and even if the trolls were clearly computer generated, they didn't look out of place. But the other half of the time, the effects could be so bad I started asking myself if maybe it was intentional. It's also a very restrained film, visually. It is an experience to behold, but it doesn't try to look as epic as possible with clever angles and golden ratios and forced perspective until the finale. Therefore, the end can seem a bit out of place with the rest of the film, and the people who are hoping for a Norwegian Cloverfield may find themselves a bit disappointed by the amateurish camera work that make up the bulk of the film. Personally, I think it works, but I definitely see people being disappointed it didn't live up to their expectations. The Troll Hunter is a fantastic film, with heart, brain, and a story that won't quit. However, while I find a certain comfort in its nihilistic outlook, I don't expect everyone to share my mindset, and I realize many of the references and layers may be lost on a lot of people. With that in mind, I sentence The Troll Hunter to a 9 on a scale of 11. I think I'm gonna add this to my list of films to watch around Christmas, together with Nightmare and Terry Pratchett's Hogfather. My only issue is, I think I may never live down the fact that one of my favorite found footage movies is a movie that mocks the entire genre. Thank you all for watching. I have been Cool Scratches. Make sure to follow my art channel, my DA, my Twitter, and I have also started to become active on my gaming channel as well. Like, comment, subscribe, tell a friend, and I hope you will see me again next year.
Om det blir något, ja.
Merry Christmas.
Gud finns och Jesus är död. Men om det blir något, ja det vet vi inte.